What happened to country at war in 2022 and 2023 to 25? First is Russia versus Ukraine invasion and territory. Known as region of February 2022. Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022. The Russian government said it wanted to stop NATO, a military alliance of Western countries, from growing, and claimed it was protecting Russian-speaking people in Ukraine. Ukraine, however, wanted to remain an independent country and have closer ties with Europe. Main reasons: Russia wanted to stop Ukraine from joining NATO. Russia wanted control over certain parts of Ukraine, like Donbass and Crimea. Russia saw Ukraine as part of its old empire and didn't want it to grow closer to Western countries. Ethiopia, ethnic and political conflict. A conflict broke out between the Ethiopian government and a group called the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF. The TPLF had ruled the country before but lost power. They felt excluded by the new government and fought back. Main reasons: political power struggle between the central government and the Tigray region. Ethnic tension between groups in the north and the central government, disagreements over who should control the army and government. Yemen, civil war and foreign involvement. Yemen's war started in 2015 but was still going in 2022. The government of Yemen was fighting against a rebel group called the Houthis. Other countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran were also involved on opposite sides. Main reasons: a failed political transition after a change of president. The Houthis, a Shia Muslim group, wanted more power. Saudi Arabia didn't want Iran, who supports the Houthis, to gain influence in the region. Syria, civil war and terrorism. Since 2011, Syria has been in civil war. In 2022, there were still battles between the government, rebels, ISIS, a terrorist group, and Kurdish fighters. Main reasons: the Syrian government, led by President Assad, used violence against protesters. People demanded freedom and democracy. Terrorist groups took advantage of the chaos. Myanmar, military coup and resistance. In 2021, Myanmar's military took over the government by force. Many people didn't accept this and began protesting and fighting back in 2022. Main reasons: a military coup that overthrew a democratic government, citizens forming resistance groups, ethnic armed groups also joined the fight. Somalia, terrorism and instability. The government of Somalia was fighting a group called Al-Shabaab, a violent extremist group that wants to control the country. Main reasons: terrorist group wants to enforce strict Islamic law. The government is weak and divided. Foreign peacekeepers helped fight the group. Sudan, ethnic conflict and violence. In areas like Darfur, different ethnic groups fought each other. There were also problems with the government not protecting people. Main reasons: ethnic tension and tribal fighting. Land and resource disputes. Weak or corrupt government control. Mali and the Sahel, terrorism and foreign intervention. It is called a terrorist insurgence. Terrorist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS were active in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. France and the UN sent soldiers to help local governments. Main reasons: extremist groups attacking towns and villages. Weak governments couldn't stop them. Foreign countries got involved to stop terrorism from spreading. Summary: why countries were at war in 2022. Cause of war explanation. Territorial disputes. Countries or groups wanted control over land, e.g., Russia, Ukraine. Ethnic or religious conflict. Groups of different ethnicities or religions fought for power, e.g., Ethiopia, Myanmar. Political power struggles. Governments and rebel groups fought over who should rule, e.g., Syria, Yemen. Terrorism and extremism. Armed groups used violence to gain power, e.g., Somalia, Mali. Foreign interference. Other countries got involved, which made the wars worse, e.g., Yemen, Mali. 2023. In 2023, several countries continued to experience war and armed conflict, often driven by unresolved issues from past years, such as territorial disputes, political power struggles, ethnic violence, or religious extremism. Below is a detailed explanation of why specific countries were at war in 2023. Ukraine versus Russia, why the war continued in 2023. The war that began in February 2022 continued through 2023. Russia maintained its military invasion of Ukraine, trying to seize more land in eastern and southern Ukraine. Ukraine resisted and launched counteroffensives to reclaim lost territory. Russia continued to justify the war by claiming it was protecting Russian-speaking people and preventing NATO's expansion, but these claims were rejected by much of the world. Ukraine insisted on its right to independence, democracy, and territorial integrity. Peace negotiations failed because neither side was willing to give up its core demands. Russia wanted control, Ukraine wanted freedom. The war turned into a long and devastating conflict with huge destruction and global consequences. Sudan. Why the war started in 2023. In April 2023, a new war erupted in Sudan between two military factions, the Sudanese Armed Forces (SAF) and the Rapid Support Forces (RSF). These two groups were once allies but turned against each other during a struggle for political power after the fall of Sudan's longtime dictator Omar al-Bashir in 2019. The war started because both sides wanted control over Sudan's future government and military. Efforts to transition to civilian rule collapsed. As each side tried to gain dominance, fighting broke out in major cities, including the capital, Khartoum. The war caused massive destruction, civilian deaths, and a growing humanitarian crisis. Yemen. Why the war continued in 2023. Yemen remained in a fragile state of conflict. The main sides, the Houthi rebels, supported by Iran, and the internationally recognized Yemeni government, backed by Saudi Arabia and the UAE, had periods of ceasefire in 2022, but no lasting peace was achieved. In 2023, some fighting restarted in different parts of Yemen, especially around oil-rich areas and strategic towns. The Houthis and government forces accused each other of breaking truce terms. Political dialogue stalled, and humanitarian aid access remained a challenge. Although large-scale offensives decreased, the conflict dragged on, with civilians suffering from food shortages, lack of healthcare, and displacement. Myanmar, Burma. Why the war continued in 2023. The military junta that took control in 2021 faced growing resistance in 2023. Civilian groups formed armed militias called the People's Defense Forces, PDF, which attacked military outposts. Ethnic armed groups from regions like Kachin, Karen, and Chin also joined the resistance. The war in Myanmar was fueled by widespread anger at the military's overthrow of an elected government. Civilians demanded democracy and rights, while the army tried to keep power by using force. In 2023, the fighting became more organized, with anti-junta forces capturing territory. The military responded with brutal airstrikes and raids. International efforts to stop the violence failed, and the country slipped further into civil war. Syria. Why the war continued in 2023. Syria's civil war, which began in 2011, continued in a fragmented way in 2023. The Syrian government, led by Bashar al-Assad, controlled much of the country, but parts of northern Syria remained under control of Kurdish forces, Turkish-backed rebels, and jihadist groups. Tensions between these groups kept flaring into clashes. Turkish military operations targeted Kurdish groups near the border. In some areas, ISIS fighters carried out attacks, even though their main bases were destroyed years earlier. Peace efforts stalled, and millions of Syrians were still displaced or living in poverty. The country remained deeply divided, with no clear path to peace. Somalia. Why the war continued in 2023. The Somali government, with help from African Union forces and US airstrikes, continued its fight against the extremist group Al-Shabaab. In 2023, the government launched new offensives to reclaim towns from Al-Shabaab in central Somalia. Al-Shabaab responded with bombings, assassinations, and attacks on military bases. The group still held significant rural territory and collected taxes in the areas it controlled. The Somali government's goal was to push the group out completely, but the weak national institutions and security gaps made this difficult. The conflict remained deadly and ongoing. Mali. Why the war continued in 2023. Mali remained a hotspot for jihadist violence in 2023. Islamist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS carried out frequent attacks on soldiers and civilians. The military government of Mali tried to fight them with help from the Russian Wagner Group, a private military contractor, after ending cooperation with French troops. Despite efforts to retake control, attacks continued. The fighting spread into neighboring Burkina Faso and Niger. Ethnic militias also clashed in rural areas, making the conflict even more complex. The Malian government faced criticism for human rights abuses and lack of progress. Peace remained far off. Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, why the war escalated in 2023. In eastern Congo, fighting between the government army and an armed group called M23 intensified in 2023. M23 is a rebel group mostly made up of ethnic Tutsi fighters. They claim to be protecting their people from discrimination. The government accused neighboring Rwanda of supporting M23, which Rwanda denied. The war displaced hundreds of thousands of people. Other armed groups also operated in the region, making it one of the most violent places in Africa. The United Nations and other peacekeeping missions struggled to bring stability. Israel and Palestinian territories, Gaza and West Bank, why the conflict intensified in 2023. In 2023, violence between Israeli forces and Palestinian groups in Gaza and the West Bank increased. Israel carried out airstrikes after rocket attacks by militant groups like Islamic Jihad. There were also deadly raids by Israeli forces in Palestinian cities, which led to retaliation. Tensions rose over religious sites, settlements, and political control. Efforts at peace talks did not succeed. Both sides accused each other of targeting civilians. The situation remained tense and violent throughout the year, with flare-ups of warlike conditions, especially in Gaza. Nagorno-Karabakh, Azerbaijan and Armenia, why conflict returned in 2023, although a ceasefire was signed in 2020 after a war between Armenia and Azerbaijan over the Nagorno-Karabakh region, tensions rose again in 2023. Azerbaijan blockaded roads leading into the Armenian-populated part of the region, creating a humanitarian crisis. Later in the year, Azerbaijan launched a military offensive to take full control of the area. The Armenian separatist government in Nagorno-Karabakh surrendered, and tens of thousands of ethnic Armenians fled. Armenia accused Azerbaijan of ethnic cleansing, while Azerbaijan claimed it was restoring sovereignty. The conflict left deep wounds between the two nations. These wars in 2023 show how unresolved tensions, military power struggles, ethnic divisions, and extremism continue to cause violence around the world. Each conflict has its own roots and reasons, but most come down to who controls power, land, or identity. 2025. Israel vs. Iran. Why war started in 2025. On June 13, 2025, Israel launched a surprise strike targeting Iran's nuclear and military infrastructure, including assassinations of top scientists and commanders, halting diplomatic efforts. Iran immediately retaliated with missile and drone barrages into Israel, marking a full-scale regional war. The conflict stems from long-standing tensions over Iran's nuclear ambitions and Israel's determination to eliminate military threats. The US has intervened to shoot down missiles and defend Israeli territory. Russia versus Ukraine. Why the war continues in 2025. This war, ongoing since early 2022, remained active in 2025. In March, a shaky 30-day ceasefire collapsed when Russia resumed airstrikes on Ukrainian infrastructure. Ukraine and Western countries continued backing Ukraine, though peace prospects remain distant. Sudan's civil war. Why the war persists. Since April 2023, Sudan's military, SAF, battles the Rapid Support Forces, RSF. In early 2025, RSF launched offensives in Darfur and border areas near Libya and Egypt, complicating the conflict. International mediation has repeatedly failed, and both sides remain heavily armed and backed. The war is driven by a power struggle over Sudan's future leadership and external interests. Ethiopia, war in Amhara. Why war flared again in 2025. Militia groups known as Fano in the Amhara region resumed offensives in March 2025, targeting federal troops. Government counter-strikes, including a drone strike on a school, killed over 100 civilians. The conflict is fueled by regional political grievances, ethnic tensions, and disputes over federal authority. Somalia, Shabelle offensive. Why intensified in 2025. Al-Shabaab launched a major offensive in February 2025 across central regions, Middle and Lower Shabelle, aiming to siege Mogadishu. The group seized towns, ambushed forces, and even downed a helicopter. Government troops, AU mission forces, US and Ethiopian airstrikes responded. Myanmar's civil war. Why ongoing hot conflict. After the coup in 2021, anti-junta militias and ethnic insurgents have continued intensifying offensives through 2025, capturing territory and defying ceasefires despite a major April 2025 ceasefire pause after an earthquake. The conflict is rooted in the struggle against military rule and long-standing ethnic autonomy issues. DRC M23 rebellion, why violence escalated in 2025. Rebel group M23, backed by accusations against Rwanda, seized key towns like Goma in early 2025, displacing millions. They claim to protect Tutsi communities. The government accuses Rwanda of direct support. These major 2025 conflicts reflect enduring political rivalries, territorial disputes, ethnic grievances, and ideological hostility, often worsened by foreign intervention or fragile state institutions. World War III could start from a major conflict between nuclear powers, e.g. US versus China or Russia, an attack on a NATO member, triggering collective defense, a large-scale cyber attack that disables critical infrastructure, a war in the Middle East, e.g. Israel versus Iran, escalating and drawing in superpowers conflict over Taiwan involving China, the US, and allies, miscommunication or accidental military strike between rival nations, use of nuclear weapons in a regional war causing global escalation. Nuclear conflict between major powers, attack on a NATO country, China, Taiwan war, escalation, Israel, Iran regional war, global cyber attack on infrastructure, miscalculated military strike. UN and ICC investigations stalled or launched. DR Congo, North of South Kivu, a UN commission of inquiry examining reports of massacres and sexual violence linked to the M23 rebel group has been paused due to a financial crisis at the OHCHR, lacking the $3.9 million needed to continue. Wagner in West Africa, a confidential legal brief urges the ICC to probe the Wagner Group's alleged atrocities, including torture, mutilation, and cannibalism, in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. The court is reportedly reviewing the evidence. Ukraine, in 2025, Russia carried out several civilian-targeted missile attacks, such as in Kryvyi Rih, April 4, killing 20, including children, and Sumy, April 13, killing 32, with cluster munitions that are widely condemned and may constitute war crimes. The ICC, which has been investigating Russia's conduct in Ukraine since 2022, has previously issued multiple arrest warrants for senior Russian officials. ICC arrest warrants. The International Criminal Court, ICC, has issued several arrest warrants targeting high-ranking Russian officials and military commanders accused of war crimes and crimes against humanity related to the invasion of Ukraine. These include allegations such as deliberate attacks on civilians, unlawful deportations, and use of prohibited weapons. Russian military and political figures. Arrest warrants have been publicly announced for individuals including top military leaders and political figures. These warrants symbolize international legal efforts to hold responsible parties accountable. Captured suspects. Ukrainian authorities and allied forces have detained various individuals suspected of war crimes, including soldiers and commanders who allegedly participated in unlawful acts during military operations. Trials and investigations. Ukraine and other countries have started domestic and international investigations to prosecute suspects. Some detainees face charges such as murder, torture, and unlawful treatment of prisoners of war. Ongoing challenges. Despite warrants and arrests, many suspects remain at large, partly due to geopolitical complications and the difficulty of capturing individuals in conflict zones. Special Tribunal for the Crime of Aggression. Due to limitations in the ICC's jurisdiction, particularly concerning the crime of aggression, efforts are underway to establish a special tribunal. Council of Europe and EU support. In February 2025, the European Union and the Council of Europe announced progress toward creating a special tribunal to prosecute Russian leaders for the crime of aggression related to the invasion of Ukraine. This tribunal aims to address the legal gap left by the ICC's inability to prosecute aggression due to jurisdictional constraints. International backing. By May 2025, nearly 20 European nations endorsed the establishment of this tribunal, with the Netherlands offering to host it. The tribunal would operate under Ukrainian law but is intended to have international support and recognition. International cooperation. The Task Force on Accountability for Crimes Committed in Ukraine, established in March 2022, continues to support Ukrainian prosecutors in coordinating legal cases for war crimes and other crimes related to the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine. Checking out the news about this war. The world's news is happening on country. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Do not hesitation to share everything, checking for breaking news and top news. The NATO summit was a Canada 5% was defense spending exactly in $150 billion.